I never thought my simple rainwater collection system would spark an all-out war with my HOA. When they started stealing my water for their precious garden, how could I have known it would end with their entire office underwater? The first drops hit my new rain barrels with a satisfying plink. After months of saving, I'd finally installed a complete system to water my vegetable garden without hiking up my bills. 5 connected barrels could store enough to last through dry spells in Cedar Hollow. I practically danced as the spring shower filled them, or should have. 3 storms later, something didn't add up. My barrels stayed barely a quarter full despite heavy rainfall. I crawled under my deck, tracing the gutter lines, and found something that made my blood boil: unauthorized diversion pipes. I was still on my knees in the mud when a shadow loomed. Mrs. Carter, president of the Maple Grove HOA, stood at the edge of my property with her clipboard and trademark frown. "Mr. Hayes," she called, not waiting for me to stand, "your garden beds extend 5 inches beyond your approved landscaping plan." I wiped mud from my knees. "Forget my garden beds? Who put these pipes on my gutters?" She glanced at the pipes with feigned disinterest. "The association made necessary adjustments to all corner properties. If you'd attended last month's meeting, you'd know we voted to optimize water distribution." "Optimize? You're stealing my rainwater." "Don't be dramatic," she sighed, scribbling on her clipboard. "Per Bylaw 64.2, all excess precipitation benefits community spaces. Your collection system wasn't approved by the Architectural Committee anyway." 2 maintenance workers in Maple Grove uniforms appeared behind her, nodding like this was perfectly reasonable. "I never agreed to this," I said, following as she walked along my property line. The diversion system was clever. Small channels hidden with landscaping stones led to larger pipes disappearing underground. "Majority rules, Mr. Hayes," Mrs. Carter said. "The community garden needs consistent irrigation." I remembered that garden, a pristine display right behind the HOA office, one I'd refused to fund through increased dues. My blood pressure spiked. "You're charging me more in dues while stealing resources from my property?" My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. Mrs. Carter turned icy eyes on me. "Watch your tone. You're already accumulating violations this quarter." As they left, I traced the pipes to their destination, the elaborate garden that mostly benefited board members' properties, including Mrs. Carter's impeccable Tudor home with its perfect view of the manicured space. Back home, I called the Willow County Water Authority, who explained that rainwater rights were tricky and governed by HOA agreements. I'd need to check my contract, the same dense document likely hiding that Bylaw 64.2. While digging through my files, a knock came. A bright orange violation notice and a $250 fine for unauthorized landscape modifications and confrontational behavior toward association representatives awaited me. That night, sleep wouldn't come. Through my window, I watched the sprinklers activate in the community garden, wastefully spraying my stolen rainfall despite the day's downpour. My phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor Ethan. "Saw Carter at your place. You okay?" I replied, "They're stealing my rainwater for their garden." His response was instant. "Not just yours. Come over tomorrow. Bring your HOA contract." The next day, Ethan's dining table vanished under papers, property maps, HOA bylaws, and drainage plans. He'd fought the association over a fence height issue last year and won. He pointed to Section 64.2. This clause about excess precipitation was added last year without proper notification. "Technically, it's not binding. Can we fight it alone?" "Tough," he said, "but I've been talking with neighbors." Margaret, down the street, is a retired civil engineer. She's been tracking the board's activities for years. That afternoon, Margaret's kitchen became our war room. At 70, she had a spark in her eyes as she spread diagrams across her table. "They're not just taking your water," she said, pointing to colored lines on a neighborhood map. "They've built an underground system diverting from 5 properties to water their gardens and fill that absurd decorative fountain." Ethan tapped another section. "Look who benefits most. All 4 board members' properties have prime views and access." Margaret nodded. They've been at this for years. Remember the old willow tree removal? The sidewalk rerouting? Always benefiting the same properties under the guise of community interests. My phone buzzed, an HOA email. Dues were increasing again to cover landscape irrigation improvements. This is outrageous, I muttered, showing them. Margaret studied her topographic overlay, then smiled faintly. You know what's interesting about water? It always seeks the lowest point unless diverted. She pointed to the map. The HOA office sits at the bottom of a natural basin. Without their diversion system, guess where all this rainwater would flow? Ethan grinned. Right into their precious building. I'm not suggesting anything, Margaret said, her innocent tone betrayed by a mischievous glint. She slid schematics of the diversion system across the table. But hypothetically, if someone modified these connection points during the next heavy rain, my heart raced. Wouldn't they trace it back to us? Margaret shook her head. That's the beauty of water. When their system fails, it'll just be nature taking its course. As if on cue, my weather app chimed. A massive storm system, the biggest in 5 years, was hitting Cedar Hollow that weekend. Coincidentally, the HOA had scheduled their annual garden showcase for Sunday afternoon. I looked between my allies, a plan forming. What would these modifications involve? Margaret's smile widened as she sketched diagrams, explaining pipe connections and flow dynamics in simple terms. For the first time since finding those pipes, I felt in control. That night, another violation notice arrived. My rain barrels detracted from neighborhood aesthetic standards. The fine doubled to $500. I filed it away, a strange calm settling over me. Mrs. Carter had no idea what was coming. Dark clouds loomed as I hauled supplies into my garage Friday night. Margaret had provided detailed instructions and custom pipe sections to redirect the water to its natural flow. Ethan helped organize while his teenage son kept watch from the window. 6-hour installation window during the storm, Ethan reminded me, checking our list. You'll need waterproof gear. A car slowed in front of my house. We froze until it passed. Mrs. Carter has been driving by regularly, I said. She suspects something. Of course she does, Margaret replied, joining us with laminated diagrams protected from the rain. That's why we're moving forward with Phase 2 as well. Phase 2 was Ethan's idea, documentation. His daughter Lila, a journalism major, had compiled a report on the HOA's shady practices, water diversion, selective enforcement, and financial discrepancies in landscaping contracts consistently awarded to Mrs. Carter's cousin's company. We'll distribute these at the emergency meeting they'll call after the storm, Ethan explained, showing me the evidence folder. Margaret's already filed water rights complaints with the county. But will it be enough? I worried. The HOA board had survived complaints before. Margaret's eyes gleamed. That's where your neighbor Samantha comes in. Samantha worked for Channel 7 News. She'd been quietly filming the HOA's water diversion system and arranged for a news van to coincidentally cover storm damage in our neighborhood Sunday afternoon. The plan was airtight, but it hinged on my part, modifying the diversion system during the storm's peak when visibility would be lowest. Rain began falling as we finished preparations. The forecast predicted over 4 inches, enough to overwhelm storm drains. With our modifications, the water would flow straight to the HOA office. Remember, Margaret cautioned as they left, you're not creating anything new. You're removing their artificial diversions and letting nature reclaim its course. I barely slept, listening to the intensifying rainfall. By 3 a.m., it was a downpour. I donned waterproof coveralls, boots, and a dark rain jacket, then slipped into my backyard with a headlamp and Margaret's tools. The storm provided cover, lightning illuminated my work briefly, thunder masking noise. I located the main junction box Margaret had identified, where 5 properties' diversions fed the community garden system. My fingers shook as I replaced the directional valve with Margaret's modified version. It looked identical but would fail under increased water pressure, restoring the natural downhill flow. 3 more junction points needed similar changes. Water pooled around my ankles as I worked on the final connection near the property line. Headlights swept across the street. I doused my lamp and pressed myself into the mud behind bushes. Mrs. Carter's SUV crept past, wipers battling the downpour. She was patrolling despite the conditions. After she passed, I finished the connection and retreated to my garage, heart pounding. By dawn, the storm peaked. From my window, I watched water flowing as Margaret predicted, no longer diverted to the community garden, but seeking the lowest point, the HOA office. I made coffee and waited, checking the security camera I'd installed facing the street. At 8:15 a.m., Mrs. Carter's SUV splashed through a stream running down our road. She parked at the HOA office and stepped out, sinking ankle-deep in swirling water. Her expression as she waded to the door was priceless. Through binoculars, I saw her fumble with keys, pushing the door open, only to be met by a wave escaping from inside. Within 30 minutes, her frantic calls brought the board to the scene. They arrived in luxury cars, forced to park a block away due to rising water. Even from my vantage point, I heard Mrs. Carter shouting accusations. By noon, the rain eased. My phone buzzed with an emergency HOA meeting notification for 3 p.m. at the Cedar Hollow Community Center. The office was temporarily unusable due to water damage. Ethan texted, "It worked perfectly." Samantha's news van is filming flood damage on Pine Street. Margaret added, "Bring your violation notices and checkbook records." Showtime. I arrived at the community center to find it packed. Homeowners who usually skipped meetings had turned out, curious about the flooded office and eager for drama. Mrs. Carter stood at the front, hair damp, trying to maintain composure. This emergency session addresses the catastrophic flooding of association property, she began, voice tight with rage. Preliminary investigation suggests deliberate tampering with our water management system. Her eyes landed on me. Some individuals recently cited for violations may have engaged in sabotage. Whispers spread. I kept a neutral expression. "This is a targeted attack," she continued, pointing at soggy documents on tables. "Our insurance requires a police report for vandalism claims." As she pointed at me, Margaret stood from the front row. "Actually, Mrs. Carter," she said loudly, "I've brought evidence that might interest everyone." Ethan whispered, "It's tonight or never," as we huddled under his garage overhang earlier that week. Rain pounded the pavement, creating rivers along the curb's perfect conditions. I pulled my raincoat hood tighter and nodded. "Margaret's modifications are ready," Ethan said, patting his waterproof bag. 5 redirector valves and the master control switch. Once installed, gravity does the rest. My heart hammered as we slipped between houses, the storm's roar covering our movements. We located the first hidden diversion pipe behind my lilac bushes. Ethan worked quickly, replacing the HOA's illegal valve with Margaret's modified version. "Remember," he said, "we're not creating anything new. We're removing their illegal system and letting water flow naturally." We moved house to house, following Margaret's map. Old Mrs. Thompson's property was tricky. The HOA had hidden pipes beneath her prized hydrangeas. Lightning cracked as we worked around her plants. "Last one," Ethan announced at House 5. "Once I flip this master switch, the system reverts to natural drainage." I hesitated. "What if we get caught? Do you want your water back or not?" His eyes gleamed with challenge. The switch clicked quietly, but its impact felt monumental. "Now we wait," I said. Back to the meeting. Sleep had evaded me that night, imagining water gathering, finding its natural path downhill to the lowest point in Cedar Hollow, directly beneath the HOA office. Dawn broke brightly post-storm. I peered through my blinds. Neighbors gathered at the street's end, pointing excitedly. Grabbing my coffee, I strolled down. "Never seen anything like it," said Tom from 2 doors down. "The whole office is in a lake." Water surrounded the single-story HOA building, reaching halfway up the door. The community garden beside it, where they'd used our stolen water, now looked like a swamp. Mrs. Carter's SUV screeched to a halt at the water's edge. She stepped out, her polished boots splashing into the puddle before she realized its depth. Her shriek echoed. "Someone call emergency services," she demanded, turning to the crowd. "This is vandalism. Property destruction." I sipped my coffee. "Looks like drainage issues to me. Maybe someone should have consulted a proper engineer before redesigning the neighborhood's natural water flow." Her eyes narrowed. This is your doing." Before I could respond, Margaret appeared beside me, camera in hand. Documenting the flood for the Homeowners Association records, she said pleasantly. "Also, I've invited Channel 7 News. They're doing a special on water rights violations in suburban communities." Mrs. Carter paled. "You wouldn't dare." "The Willow County Water Authority was very interested in my call this morning," Margaret continued, "especially about unpermitted water diversion affecting multiple properties." A news van pulled up. "Emergency meeting, community center, 1 hour," Mrs. Carter announced, sloshing back to her car. I shared a secret smile with Ethan and Margaret. Phase 1, complete. The community center buzzed with angry conversations. Nearly every homeowner showed up, an unprecedented turnout. I sat between Ethan and Margaret, who'd spread her documentation across 3 chairs. Mrs. Carter tapped the microphone. "This emergency session will address the flooding incident and necessary repairs." "Who's paying for these repairs?" someone shouted. "Our insurance will cover," Mrs. Carter said. "Why was our office in a flood zone to begin with?" another voice interrupted. Mrs. Carter adjusted her silver necklace nervously. "Natural drainage patterns." "Which you altered," Margaret called out, standing slowly. The room quieted. "I've brought evidence that might interest everyone." "This isn't the time," Mrs. Carter started. "Show us," multiple voices demanded. Margaret unrolled large property maps across the front table. "These are the original drainage plans for Cedar Hollow, approved by the county 12 years ago." She overlaid a transparent sheet. "And these are the unpermitted modifications made by the current board over the past 3 years." Gasps filled the room. "The HOA has diverted water from 5 properties," Margaret continued, pointing to my house and 4 others, all to benefit their unapproved garden project and decorative fountain. "That's ridiculous," Mrs. Carter sputtered. "We've improved community aesthetics." "With stolen water," I said, standing beside Margaret. "Water you took from my collection system after fining me for installing it." "And mine," added Mrs. Thompson, rising shakily with her cane. "My water bill doubled while my roses died," the Channel 7 reporter scribbled furiously. Furthermore, Ethan added, approaching with a folder, "I've obtained financial records showing HOA funds spent on this illegal system. $2,500 of our dues." The room exploded in outrage. "What happened last night," I said over the noise, "was simply nature reclaiming its course when these illegal modifications failed during the storm." Mrs. Carter's face twisted with fury. "You sabotaged our system. That's criminal damage." The HOA lawyer whispered urgently in her ear. Her expression shifted to fear. "We may have acted without proper permits," she conceded reluctantly. "May have." Margaret raised an eyebrow, sliding a letter across the table. "The Willow County Water Authority disagrees. They've launched an official investigation." As the meeting descended into chaos, I caught Ethan's eye. His nod confirmed what I knew. This wasn't over. A reporter approached me as the crowd swarmed Mrs. Carter. "Sir, would you say this represents a growing trend of HOA overreach in your community?" I smiled, knowing my words would air on the evening news. "I just wanted to collect rainwater. I never expected to uncover a flood of corruption."